I'm Amanda Schuster, and I'm very glad to be here. Thank you, Ben and Rob. So I am a lifestyle writer based in New York City. I have been working mostly in the beverage media space for the past couple of decades now. My career started, I thought I was going to be a sommelier, and that didn't quite work out because the hours didn't really agree with me. And I had had no front of house experience. And so those two things didn't quite work out. But I went into the retail side and worked at Astor Wine and Spirits in New York City, which is one of the biggest liquor stores in the whole city. And from there, I became their assistant spirits buyer kind of by accident, just from showing an interest in selling spirits on the floor. And they said, hey, how about we give you an education and introduce you to some people? And it happened to be a time when all of these people like David Wondrich and Dale DeGroff and Jared Brown and Eric Seed was coming up with Hausal pens, and all of these new brands were happening. And there was practically a rye shortage because everybody discovered Manhattans all of a sudden because Mad Men came out. And it was just this really crazy time. And so it was a really amazing time to be sort of thrown into this pool and in the deep end, no less. And I just kind of paddled up, and it went from there. I really wanted to write. I really wanted to sort of meld my background. I have an academic background. I actually have a medieval history degree. And I always was writing in school, and I wanted to get back into that. And so it was a really good time, with blogs just coming up and new publications like Imbibe and liquor.com coming up to get in on that ground floor. But I still had to, as a woman, use my voice and find my own path in order to make it happen. And so that's something that I've been very proud of, that I do things a bit differently than everybody else. So the third book that I've written, the first one was New York Cocktails, and the second was Drink Like a Local New York, gets us out of New York City this time and all around the world. It's signature cocktails for Fiden. And it's 200 signature cocktails from around the world that spans the entire history of cocktails and even a little bit before. We call some things cocktails because they are mixed drinks, but they're from, I think the earliest one is from the 1400s. And that was having this very loose definition is one of the things that intrigued me about the project, was to be able to discuss cocktails as an idea and signature cocktails as a way to express a person, place, thing, or event in a way that hadn't been done before. And also the opportunity to put very new things up against very old things, because most of the books are, here are, all these classic cocktails, or here's a book on the old fashioned, or here's a book just about this one city or this one place or this one bar. And so it was a really wonderful opportunity to sort of get outside of New York, travel a bit, at least from my armchair. And this was written during the pandemic, of course, and learn about new things. I mean, I didn't know a lot of the history about many of the subjects. And because I had people like Jared Brown and Anastasia Miller and Emma Jansen and Kemper English and Robert Simonson and Vivian Pay working with me to tell me about cocktails that were more in their experience, and say, hey, maybe this is a good idea for you to research. And so that was just a really fun opportunity for me as a person with an academic background to get a chance to explore a little outside of my comfort zone. The project came to me. Most books, I don't know if everybody knows this, but a lot of cocktail books are commissions from a publisher. They have an idea, they need somebody to write it. And I think they had thought of someone else. I think Adrienne Stillman, who had written Spirited for Fiden, was tapped to do it, but she was too busy doing something else. And so she floated my name, and we met, and it worked out. And silly me, they said, "Hey, do you want some help with this? Do you think maybe you can do?" And at the time it was 250 cocktails. Think you could do this yourself? I'm like, "Well, I'm not going anywhere. It's 2020." At the time it was 2021, then it became 2022. But um I thought, what else am I going to do? I want to have my name on the cover, my name on the cover. Silly me. I'm going to write 200 essays. Let's just get this done. So that's kind of how it happened. I had a big head is what is really, and but no, I made it work, and I was really excited to actually work on that many. I also wanted to have a continuous voice, and that was my reason for arguing for that case. Choosing 200 cocktails is really hard because obviously there are way more than that out in the world. And the way to really think about it is first you have to think of 100 cocktails, or maybe even just 50 cocktails. What are the ones that you absolutely can't miss? Right? And where are they from? And are there too many from this certain place versus this other place? Because if you're going to have a global book, you have to make it global. You really have to have representation. And so there are obviously going to be, as it is in the book, many cocktails from New York City and other parts of the United States, like New Orleans, who have so many things in the classic canon. But then, there's London, obviously, and Tokyo. But then we started finding things about, wow, there are a lot of new cocktails from Mexico City that are becoming modern classics. And we really have to talk about those. And we have to talk about Paris, obviously, and some of the other places in the world. So it really became, once we got the iconic ones down, okay, what haven't we talked about yet? And filling in those blanks, and then finding people, as I had mentioned before, I had consultants working on the book in terms of building the list with me, and telling me about ones that they thought maybe I might be missing, or that I just didn't know about because it has been outside of my own research experience. So it was a very much a collaboration, and working a bit with the Fiden team too, who had known about some things and wanted to bring them to my attention. The hardest thing about writing the book was sometimes not getting to spend as much time as I wanted with a certain entry because I had to write them quite quickly. If I had the ideal situation, I would have had many more months to work on this and to really get to know something and maybe walk away from it. When I write, I really like to write something, go away, come back to it, or think about other things while I'm walking or cooking or taking a shower or whatever it is. I like to have a moment where I'm solitary and I'm not really taking in outside information, and I can really think about what I've written. And so I wish I'd had a little bit more time to do that. That was very difficult. And also just culling, finding certain things, but then also having to cut others. And there were some very painful cuts because we had too much representation, say, from the United States, and we needed to cut a few of the US cocktails down, or some of even the London cocktails down. And that was tricky, and some of it had to do with what period in history that they fell. It's like, okay, we have too many from this timing, and we need to have something from before or something in the middle. And so we have to cut something from over here and add something from over here. And that was, I think, the most difficult part was really organizing. I must say, I had very little input in the design of the book, but I was quite pleased with how it turned out. The biggest part of it that I had the most direct work with was the photographs, and making sure that, for instance, the right garnish is used, or the correct glassware, or it looks like it's the right temperature. And so I was a real stickler, and anybody on the Fiden team will tell you that that might have been one of the most difficult parts of putting the book together, was getting past me as as the what I became kind of like the photo dictator in a way, because that was the one thing that I knew I would have control over, and I knew they were going to do everything else. But I was very pleasantly surprised. I could not be more thrilled with the cover. Those are my colors. I wear red and black and gold all the time anyway. And so I was so happy that that was the color they chose. And I love a lot of the interior details. I love the way the forward looks and you know the beginning pages, and there's plenty of room for signatures in signature cocktails, which I also love. And I'm not entirely sure if that was on purpose or not, but I'm very happy that that element is there. One of the cocktails that I was actually going to skip was Soyer au Champagne. I think it's the early 1800s in London. And I was like, okay, fine. So it's a champagne ice cream float. What's the big deal? And then I learned more about Alexis Soyer and what he was doing and why this cocktail was created. And it was this crazy food hall in Victorian London using every special effect they could possibly create without electricity because they weren't using electricity in those days. So it was like flashing gas lamps and murals that, you know, with different kinds of lighting so that something would look icy and something would look hot and something would look steamy, even though there was no steam, even though there was no ice. Something would look tropical, something would look like you're in an Italian grotto, or I, there was a dungeon apparently, but I don't know what was served there or how it was served. But but there was a dungeon scene. So I love that there was a bar, and it was one of the first cocktail bars ever in London. And this is one of the drinks that was served. And this is where everybody gathered to come up with a game plan to visit the rest of the food hall. And it was really one of the first times that anything had been like that in London, you know, never mind the special effects, but just that kind of bar. And so I didn't know a lot about these things, and I learned what an American bar was, for example, what that meant, which is that it was mixed drinks of any kind, because apparently that was a thing in America, but not so much in the UK at the time. You know, you guys were mostly into punch, not so much cold mixed drinks. And so that was a fairly new concept. And it really sounded like, I mean, there was a blue drink there was an RTD, there were all kinds of things that really foretold what we'd be drinking a century on. Signature cocktails, I feel, I don't know if there's one specific kind of reader. I'd like to think that it's one of those books that can sit behind a bar and you pick it up and you're just kind of leafing through it and you look at something one day and put it down and pick it up and look at another thing, or you have to remember what a certain recipe was or what the origin was. And because it's arranged in different ways, so the index is the name of the cocktail or the country or the creator or the place. And so there are a lot of different ways to look at a cocktail, or if you know, and it's sequential. So if you have a notion of when something was created, you can just kind of leaf through the book and find it that way. And so I think it's really about, are you a cocktail enthusiast? Are you a bartender? Are you somebody who just likes history? I'm hoping that people who don't even drink would like reading the book just for the stories. So, and or somebody who just likes, you know, the look of cocktails but doesn't necessarily make them. I really want it to be a book for that's useful, but also something nice to look at and something to reference now and again, not just read once and put it on a shelf. The biggest thing that I'm working on now, I don't have another book on the horizon exactly. There are ideas, but nothing has quite come up yet. But I did start a Substack a couple of months ago, Amanda Schuster. And um, what I wanted to do, and the reason why I did it, like, do we need another newsletter? No, we don't. You need my newsletter though. And here's why. I wanted to mix things up. You know me from, you know, when I write editorially of writing about cocktails or writing about New York City. Lately, there have been a lot of calls for listicles and things that I don't get as excited to write about. And also it takes, no joke, from pitch to publication, sometimes 90 days to get something going, even if it's accepted. And so I wanted to start a newsletter because I could, if I had an idea the day before or the day of, I could just write it and get it out there. And it gives me a chance to to make playlists, which is really fun, and talk about them. That's part of the part of the newsletter that I really enjoy. And I just like having the freedom to say what I feel like saying, and then not saying it when I don't feel like saying it. I was quite ill for a week or so. I had the latest bout of the pestilence of COVID, and it really kind of ate my brain a little bit, and I needed to take some time away. And it was a good time to kind of sit and think about what I'd written so far and how I wanted to do things moving forward. And just this week, although this is probably going to air after this happens, but I am interviewing a very special person in the industry this week, and I'm super excited about that. The Duran Duran cocktail happened. As most people know who know me, I'm a massive Duran Duran fan. I have been since the early 1980s, and I share a birthday with John Taylor, which is fun. And when I have written two articles about with Duran Duran cocktails. The first time was just an idea that was floated with me with a friend, like, hey, if there are a bunch of songs, what if we get a bunch of bartenders um to write their interpretation of a Duran Duran song and cocktail? And when I crowdsourced this, I thought, oh, maybe there'll be one or two answers. How many, Duran Duran is considered a certain um demographic. My bartender friends are going to be too young, they're not going to get it. And the response was overwhelming, and everybody wanted to do it, and people were fighting over which song to do, and ingredients and all of this. And so it was a ton of fun, and it really brought people together, and I just loved it. And Duran Duran picked it up and put it on their website, which was unbelievable. And when I was writing this book, I really wanted to have one of those because it is a signature. It's my signature. I get to have one cocktail in there. And so I decided her name is Rio, which is Abigail Gulot, from New Orleans, who will be seen in a couple of weeks. And she has a cherry ice cream smile cocktail, which I asked for. I think it was the second article, which was a celebration of their second album, Rio. So, and I got it in there, and they were really excited, and they all have a copy of the book. My hometown of New York City is one of the greatest ones in the world to go have a drink, any kind of drink. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a cocktail. Um, what's nice about it is there are constantly new bars that are doing exciting things, but it's important to think about that we have some of these iconic old spots too. I mean, one of my favorite bars is Keen's, which has been open since the early 1900s. It's one of the original saloons. It was designed by Harry Johnson. And you have a Manhattan, and you see people come into the bar who have never even had one before, or they're just visiting New York City and learning about it, and people at the bar start to have conversations with each other. I can't tell you how many times I've gone for lunch and sat at the bar and ended up talking to somebody I don't know. And New York is very much like that. It's a huge city that feels like a small town sometimes. And we have a lot of bars that have that feel. I mean, Amoria Margot is definitely one of them. I live in Carroll Gardens, Cobble Hill, which has three of my favorite bars in the whole city. We have Long Island Bar to one side. We have Travel Bar on the other side, which is they like to say a neighborhood bar with a whiskey problem. And we have Grand Army, which is always doing a really cool menu. I think they have their summer camp menu up right now. Yeah, a lot of creative voices and places to go in between, and it can be casual, and you can just walk in. We're getting a few of the kind of hotel bars that are on par with other cities in the world too. I think it's an interesting time. It's constantly evolving. It's constantly figuring itself out. Sure, it's expensive, but there are places where it's a bit more relaxed, and I think you can have a little bit of both.